My name is Anthony Bogues. I'm the director of the Center for the Study of Slavery and Justice. And I would just like to say welcome to all of you on behalf of the Center for the Study of Slavery and Justice and Brown University. We are deeply honored to have this program, really multimedia mix program of the work of Anthony Romas, who is the native of Rhode Island, but who I think I can say safely is now an African diaspora artist of the world. I would like to again offer a special welcome to him and to say how deeply honored we are that we were able to host this program. I would like to also offer special thanks to our visiting scholar at the center, Claire, who worked with us, who's a visiting scholar this year, and who was the one who proposed this program and worked with us to make this happen. I should also thank the staff, Shana Weinberg and Ruth Clark from the center, who has really worked very hard to make this happen. Sometimes we sit down in these events and things seem to happen so seamlessly. But for that seamlessness to happen, there are a couple of people always behind the scenes making sure that things happen and happen on time and with a certain, if you wish, protocol and dignity, which is befitting of the kind of events that we like to have at the center. So thanks very much, Shana and Ruth. Again, thanks to Claire for suggesting the idea to us. Thanks also to the Creative Arts Council here, Brown, who gave us some money so that we could do this programming. And most of all, obviously, thanks to Tony Romas for coming back and coming to Brown. I think his work is inspiring, and I hope that there are young people in the audience who will want to say, how can I be like that later on? So thank you, Tony, and thank you all for coming. And now I turn over to Claire, who will formally introduce Tony. Claire.
Good evening. I hope if you haven't picked up a program, you should, because it has very extensive program notes, bios, and descriptions of the film. This evening's program is going to start off with a brief introduction of Tony, talking about this work that you're getting ready to see, and putting it within the context of the transatlantic legacy, but also his body of work. We're then going to see the work and then have Tony's formal talk and Q&A afterward. This is a very rare opportunity to engage in the Providence premiere of some cutting-edge work and pioneering work in video art. So it's with a great honor and pleasure that I introduce Tony Ramus, and I ask him to come and do his brief introduction. Then we'll see the film. And following this, there's going to be a reception at the Center for the Study of Slavery and Justice on Waterman Street, and I hope to see you all there. Thank you.
This is a Portapak. This is a black and white reel-to-reel Portapak. The next one was in color, and it is what was used to make this film you're about to see. This was the iPad of its time. It was an extraordinary instrument that allowed regular people to do their own image, to do their own narrative about what was happening. And when I received the one that I had, not this one, my color one, it was from a grant from the Rhode Island Committee for the Humanities. That's what it was called in those days. I believe it's called the Committee for, I don't know, Rhode Island Council for the Humanities. Now they've changed their name since then. But it allowed me to get equipment and go to Cape Verde for the first time, and then afterwards I went to a number of other places, Tanzania, Kenya, and so on. And this film, much of what's on it does not exist anymore, as you'll see, but I would just as soon talk about it after you see it because there are certain things in it that I would like to address later. Okay.
How'd you get here?
By which way did I come?
What brought you here? What brought you
Oh, why did I come? I wanted to come to Africa. It's my home, you know. And I've felt very strongly about that.
You mean spiritually you'd spend your home?
It's my home spiritually, or in reality. Because I feel that even though you may leave a place and go to live somewhere else for a long time, your home is always your home. Now, if we take African people in the United States collectively, black people in the United States collectively, we know that their home is in Africa, although you can say 500 years outside of Africa, you see. But 500 years is very insignificant in the history of Africa. I mean, it's only a drop in the bucket, because we can talk about civilizations that are 5,000 or 6,000 years old. Great civilizations.
Man's roots being in Africa.
Man's roots being in Africa.
Yeah. So how did you come to choose Tanzania?
Tanzania because, you know, there was a time when the president, Mwalimu Nyerere, he came to the United States, and fortunately he appeared on television, and he was saying that the nation was trying to build up from the, destruction of, let's say, colonialism, so that just in reading literature, in Ujamaa, reading some of his books, and feeling that this is how I thought maybe Africa could develop, then I chose Tanzania, based upon Ujamaa.
Weren't you on your way to Mozambique?
Yeah, I was on my way to Mozambique, because, I was involved in some things, and we were giving support to different liberation movements and this, that, and the other. But I was committed myself, and at the time I felt that even if I could fight, I would be willing to fight, in the liberation war. But several things happened. One thing is that I guess many people in the States, they think that they need people to fight, but that doesn't seem to be the problem. There are plenty of people to fight, and if we look at Guinea-Bissau, if we look at Mozambique, if we look at other places where people are taking up arms, it's not that they need bodies to fight, it's often that they need supplies and equipment, materials to carry on the struggle, because there's normally many, many people who are willing to fight for their motherland, you see. So that's maybe some idealism that we had. But anyway, I could have participated, I would have, but I got here and I got involved in other things, although all the time, I've done what I could do to try to support, give moral support to liberation movements in Africa. But myself personally going, I haven't gone to Mozambique yet, but I have been to some places that I have a lot of respect for Frelimo, and I have had some very close relationships with him. The problem is we don't have any type of organization or something that speaks for us, as right now.
In the United States?
In the United States, yeah. So that's sort of a problem in a way. Yeah, this is my wife's younger sister. She's studying high school. She's named Sophia. Beautiful. Rather beautiful. And she's studying high school.
She's studying high school stuff?
Yeah.
What are you studying in high school?
See, Annie helps get rid of blotches, dark spots, the works. I followed her through history, where she taught me to give up Tarzan. She showed me humankind and continents, sensuous, creative rhythm of life. The oceans disappeared, the continents touched.
Mr. Ramos, what is this? It looks like a village of strange primitive dwellings. What are you doing in here?
Well, it's not exactly primitive, Mr. Downey. It's a village composed of those of us who used to live in the subway system, and we decided to be mobile, and we discovered that there's a village up here on the top of the city. We've been living in for about 2 years now.
Well, they look like rockets pushing up, but they also look very unhealthy, very, I don't know, primitive.
It's very late for my job this morning. They're not primitive at all. Right? They're very comfortable dwellings. And they tend to give those of us who would like to go back to a more calmer time and live in the villages and homes every day, a chance to live that life again. As I said,
But Mr. Ramos, don't you think that is rather regressive, sad?
not at all, Mr. Downey. You think the penthouse in New York, please. Please.
You're going back to the subway now, so you go out?
Inside, if you include the
Well, I had a lovely speech prepared to give with notes and everything, and I left my house in the south of France to come here and left my iPad on the bed charging. So all the nice pictures that I had of Cape Verdean ships coming in here to Providence and so on, I can't do that. So I'm going to have to wing it in song and dance, which is why I wanted to show the tape first, because I think there are a lot of things going on in that tape that need addressing to. I think that it still holds true today, many of the things that were shown in that film. I think that race is probably the one subject in the United States that governs everything else. There's nothing that happens in this country that doesn't have race as its basis and its core, and yet it's all hidden. It all seems to be hidden away, and no one really never addresses these things about race. Not only on the part of the European peoples and the Latino peoples and African Americans themselves, which when people think of racism, that's usually what they think of. But racism is I think the human disease, and everybody has it. I certainly know that anybody my age that says they're not a racist is probably lying. We all grew up in a time and a space that many of us are still very bitter about the treatment that was given to our ancestors and to ourselves as children. But I believe that what you have to do is you have to honestly face up to that history, and once you can do that, then you can create a future. There is no future. There's only the past, and we create the future as it's going along. But the past is something that exists. When I first got this video equipment back in the early 70s, very early 70s, I had no idea what to be a Cape Verdean was. It was we had a Cape Verdean club in East Providence. My mother and father spoke this funny language that I did not speak. There was cachupa and jagasida and manchupa and all of these delicious foods, but that was about it. When I went out in the street to play with the Catruccis and the Pereiras and all these other kids, we all left that at home. I remember my first pizza was Mrs. Quatrucci made a pizza. She had the farm in front of our house. That's where I learned about pizza. But the world around us was a different thing that was going on, especially in the 50s, with the political civil rights turmoil that began. We were kind of immune from it. We didn't really understand what was going on. I was very young, for one thing. But I remember sitting in front of the TV and seeing this. I remember Emmett Till being assassinated, being killed violently, and how that affected everyone. And I always remembered that we were never on TV. If we were on TV, we were Amos and Andy. We were the Little Rascals. We were Feats Do Your Stuff. We were the greatest movie ever made, Gone with the Wind. We were Birth of a Nation. These were horrible, horrible, horrible racial stereotypes that had nothing to do with anybody I knew, that anybody knew. It was a total construct of what people of African descent were, or people of Mexican descent, et cetera, et cetera. Women, I can remember Father Knows Best. Well, the little wasp wife wore pearls to do the dishes. And it just was not a world that was real. So when I got this equipment, I realized that perhaps I could make a statement about the way that I really saw it, rather than having the image given to me by NBC, CBS, ABC, the movies, Hollywood, etc. This little machine, right there. That little machine could change everything. This is what we thought those of us who had the opportunity to get our hands on these things were very, very expensive, and access to material is also part of the way that things work. If you can get access to it, then you can have a voice. But if you can't have access to it, then you don't have a voice. We thought this would give us a voice. What's happened now is everyone has one in their telephone, or what they call a telephone. You know, little kids don't even know what a payphone is when they see it, because you've got this thing that absolutely instantaneously. I take a little video of a cop beating up on somebody, and I send it to 1,000 people. Or I put it up on YouTube, and there's 1 million people. And that was the kind of the dream that we had early on with this equipment here. As far as well, let me say, I remember when I first got to Cape Verde, and there was no dock at Praia. You came in on a boat, and the portable equipment that I had gotten from the Rhode Island Committee from the Humanities was a case this big, and it had a battery in it, and I'm doing show and tell here. This was my second camera. Smells like basement. This was my second camera. This was state of the art. This was high 8 camera, and it has a tape that big in it. So you cut down on the amount of tapes that you had to use, because with this one, and mind you, I have 80 hours of Africa in the 70s. Been so long, I don't even know how to open it anymore. Feast your eyes on that. That is half-inch reel-to-reel video, and this was the cylinder for the tape. And you had to take each tape and roll it around the heads, and you had a camera this big with the lens on it. It weighed a ton. When I arrived in Cape Verde, and I had my big case, and they were laying it over the side of the ship with the rope tied around the handle. And I thought, oh my God, if these people drop this thing, it's all over. And they got it in there, and I thought, wow, wouldn't it be nice to have a hat with a camera in it? And that hat with an antenna would send it directly back to my studio, where I could then go back and edit it. Well, we've gone so far beyond that, and now I'm staggered by the idea that with my little iPad, which I left, which I would have taken pictures of you all, video, pressed the button, and boom, it's out there. It's out there for everybody. Things have changed so radically in just a 40-year period of time. It's hard for me to imagine. I don't know, if, as I said, we all believed that it was going to give power to the people. That was a big call in our day. I don't know if that's what's happened. It does appear to me that with this everybody with the camera, certainly we're focusing on things we didn't focus on before, like this police beating of people. Not only black people, but people getting beaten by the police. And now everybody runs up and says, ah, and send it off to YouTube and millions of people. That's a certain kind of power that we would have liked to have had in the 60s and 70s. And it seems to be out that people do have that power. Now, how it's used is another story. At the beginning, with our little machine, second machine, like the man said, this tape has to be across the country in 24 hours. You saw the equipment behind him? Your cell phone does that, what he's got there behind him. And this was the second generation of these things, and it was even bigger and heavier, and you had to drag these tapes with you. Each one of these tapes, each one of these machines required that you bring tapes with you, and that added to the weight of it. So not only did you have that big case, you had to bring X amount of hours of tape. And when you get back here, Electronic Arts Intermix, bless those people. There was a fellow named Howard Wise, and Howard's founded Electronic Arts Intermix to give artists like myself a chance to edit our work, to give us a voice. And you'd come back, and there would be these machines, and they were, for us, just absolutely amazing that you could press a button and do the edits. Inevitably, the machine would heat up, and your master tape would start making a funny sound. And that's what those little, every now and then you see those little lines going through that tape. That's what it's about. When you're editing, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, you're very tired, the machine is overheating and it's eating up your tape. It's not a problem that people have these days because everybody does it with a computer. And when I went, some of you were here for the tape Decent Men. And at the end, it was done over a period of 45 years. And the last 10 minutes I did recently in New York. And I went in, and I haven't been doing edit video in some time. And I went into the room, and there's this young man there, and I would say, well, can we do that? It's done. I'd say, well, can we, it's done. And these little bleeps are going along like this, and he's just pressing buttons, and there's no visible machine or anything. It's just electronically transferred. And it opened my eyes to what the possibilities are. In this tape here, there are a number of scenes. The King Kong scene, where there's yes, Fay Ray. I'll trade 10 of your women for one of hers, or whatever he says, and we laugh. But just think of that when that movie came out. That was no joke. That was the belief system. And on the other side, here's this woman, and she's talking about if you curl your hair and lighten your skin, you're going to get the man. And these were ideas that are ingrained in the culture. They still are. They still are. And it's hard. It's hard to get past that. There are a lot of things being done. Some pretty good movies being made. A lot of media that is trying to address that issue. But deep in the culture, it's there. I have no solutions for it whatsoever. And if I had my notes, I'd have something better to say. But I have some written notes. Not as good as what I had somewhere in here. I keep a journal, so I did write some ideas down. Let's see. Oh, that's the ones. Just returned from Providence. A few notes for the exhibition at Brown. The lecture should be about memory and controlling that memory. Memory, as I was saying, history, memory and history, it's really what we have. And he who controls the history, he who controls the cultural memory, rules. And that's what's been happening for the last 500 years, that Europeans have controlled the memory of the culture, and not in a very good way. And genocide has been completely wiped off. It's not part of the discussion. I came here and I was watching some cowboy movie the other day with the evil Indians and the good soldiers, American soldiers, white American soldiers killing all the Indians. And the whole thing was portrayed as, well, you know, it happened, but it's okay because everything is better now. It's the same thing for me. I was astounded when the Pope made, what is his name out there in California? Father Junipero Serra as a saint. Here is a man heading up one of the biggest Christian institution in the world, and he comes in and he says that this man who was part of a whole genocidal happening in California, and what became California, enslaved these Indians, beat them if they tried to leave, destroyed their culture, turned them into Christians, and he's a saint. And it's that kind of control of the narrative, the control of the past that has to change. Something has to change on that level. On the part of those of us of African descent who live in this country, I believe that the whole segment with the lightening of the skin and the straightening of the hair is also a major problem that again has been created by those who control the culture. So you don't want to be what you actually are. And that's a very, very difficult situation to be, and the TV has pushed that for years. It's only now that things are changing. Yeah. It says, controlling the historical narrative was a primary idea in 1984. Not only history, but language itself, where you have newspeak and doublethink. And this is a common element of our life today. I mean, you bomb a hospital in Afghanistan and you call it collateral damage. This is doublespeak. This is newspeak, doublethink, and the whole media direction is in that newspeak, doublethink. If you watch the Republican presidential talks, it was nothing but newspeak and doublethink. It had nothing to do with anything that people really want to hear. You know, portraits, seeing yourself. Seeing yourself has always been something for the ruling class. For thousands of years, most people never saw themselves unless they looked in the water in the bottom of the well. You know, the ruling class had pictures of themselves painted. They had statues made of themselves. But most of us, of our ancestors, of everybody in this room, didn't really see themselves. This little gadget here, for example, for those of you old enough to remember, is a Polaroid camera. I took this with me to Africa, and the reason I took it was to give people presents of themselves. And I was in Sudan, in a refugee camp of Ethiopians and Eritreans because this war was going on. That's something, again, you know. While I was doing all of this, wars were going on, colonial wars were going on in Africa, but it never reached this country that's what was happening. We were talking about Vietnam, but while we were doing the Vietnamese, the Portuguese were doing us, all over Africa. Anyway, so I go to Sudan, and I'm in this camp where there's all these Ethiopian and Eritrean refugees who've come across the desert, 200, 300 miles across the desert, most of them not making it. And I'm standing there, and there's an old man, and they thought I was Ethiopian or Eritrean or whatever, and there I am dressed with enough clothing that they could live for the next 5 years on what I was wearing. And he was showing me his ribs. He was trying to show me that he was starving. I couldn't figure out the age of this man. He could have been 20, he could have been 50, he could have been 100. It was hard to tell. And there was a little boy with him. So I took this, and I took his picture. And the thing popped out, and I handed it to him. But it takes a while for the image to come up. And he's looking at it like, what the hell are you giving me this thing for, idiot? You know, I'm hungry, I want some food. And the kids all knew what it was. And they were yelling at him what it was, to wait. And slowly the image came up with him and this little boy standing next to him. And his whole face changed, because he saw himself. And he gives it to the child. He's trying to explain to me that this is an image of him that can be passed on to his children, and they won't forget him. It was a very amazing gift for me to give, as far as he was concerned. To me, I was giving a little Polaroid shot. But I realized that it was more than that. And it's about having an image of yourself. So now we take it for granted. There's so many images out there, you can't stand to see them anymore. Everybody is taking images, and how many do you even look at? I take images all the time. I download them into my other computer and never look at them again. But it is a different kind of way of thinking about who we are, if you know what you look like. And that's a new thing on this planet. Yeah. Says video as a tool for telling a personal history was a major breakthrough in writing the power of images from the powers that I can't read my own handwriting. The artist as a vehicle for portraying cultural and social history. When Michelangelo signed his name to the Pieta, it changed the course of history. Before that time, artists belonged to the patron. The work was considered the work of the patron and not the artist. When Michelangelo signed the Pieta, it was a change in thought process about what art is and what the artist is. Before that, the artist was basically an artisan who was paid by the patron to do the work that the patron wanted. And the patron was the artist. Nowadays, we artists, we're kind of, I believe, the cultural barometers that we have a power within the culture to make the culture look at itself and look at itself clearly. Certainly this video equipment was one of our ideas, that we were hoping that we would be able to use this equipment to see ourselves clearly. This was one of my efforts, to try to see ourselves, to see myself clearly, and to see the culture that I lived in clearly, and to see Africa in a different way of looking. By the way, the young man that I was talking to was my college roommate at Southern Illinois University, and I ran into him in a bar, in a hotel bar in downtown Tanzania, and he was standing there, a bunch of Kiswahili folks who were the bureaucrats from the offices, and he was standing in the middle of them, and I went up to him and I said, "Bob Garrett?" And he said, "No, my name's Simba Tayari." And I said, "Simba Tayari, my ass. You're Bob Garrett." And it was so out of context. He said, "Tony?" Yeah, I embraced. So that's how I got to his house. That was his house. He was a young black revolutionary, just as many of us were, and he actually made the commitment to move to Africa. When we said, when I said, "Weren't you going to Mozambique?" and we laughed, ha 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 ha. Well, yeah, he was smuggling arms to Mozambique to fight against the Portuguese. Things like that were going on at that time, but it was certainly not on the radar of the world's idea of what was going on. Africa has been involved in revolutions for a long time. The struggle has been going on for a long time. If you were here for the PAIG, for the Cape Verdean film just this afternoon, where Pedro Pires, the second president of Cape Verde, is talking about Amilcar Cabral. Amilcar Cabral was one of the great political thinkers of the 20th century. He was assassinated by the Portuguese, I believe, in Conakry, just before independence. It was a great loss. But as I said, Africa has been involved in revolutionary struggle for a long time. It's still going on. I would think it's probably like what's going on in Syria right now, where everybody's in there stirring the pot. Well, Africa's had a lot of different people stirring the pot, especially in the 60s and 50s, 60s, and 70s when the Cold War was going on, and the Russians and the Americans used the Africans as pawns in their little game. Okay. Anyway, I would like to throw the floor open to questions, because that's as much as I can improvise. Does anyone have any questions about the tape or anything that you've seen over the last 2 days? You got? They have been shown, and very recently in New York, but I wasn't there, so I can't tell you what the response was. There was a in the program you have there was a African American film festival of some sort at Lincoln Center last year, and it was this one was shown there. Again, I can't tell you what the result was because I was not there to see it. I do have a good little story about showing it to community. When I left the first time to go to Cape Verde, and I had no idea where, what, when, or how, I got my father's friends who had not been back to Cape Verde or Senegal or anywhere else for a long time. Once they left Cape Verde, they never went back. So I had them come over to my parents' house and sat them down, and I videotaped them, asking them questions and so on and so forth. And when I got to Cape Verde, my equipment was sent to South Africa. They didn't believe that such sophisticated equipment was actually meant for Dakar. So they sent it onto South Africa, so I had to wait for my equipment to come back from South Africa. And when it eventually did, I was walking down the street, it was Easter Sunday, and I wanted to see what a Catholic Mass was like in Africa. So I went into and there was a cathedral, so I went in the cathedral, and there was a bunch of French people there, and a bunch of Kiswahili, and over in the corner were a bunch of Cape Verdeans. I know a Cape Verdean when I see one. So I waited till they came out of the church. And they were standing on the steps and all talking, and I went up to them and I used my one little phrase I know in Cape Verde. I said, "Enya, como gusta? Yes, we nya fish de nya mushina de Providence." And it was my first cousin. I said, "Whoa, okay." They were so excited. And they said, "You can't stay in that hotel. You've got to come with us." And they put me on the scooter and they took me over to their house down in the Medina. And I had my porta pack and a 5-inch color television. Had a little tiny little screen like this with a battery on it. It was high technology in its day. So I put it up on the mantle, and I turned on the pictures of my father and his friends saying this, and there was a big crowd of Cape Verdeans. They all came from all over because, wow, there's this cousin there, and he's got this equipment. All of a sudden, someone would say, this is my aunt, this is my grandmother, and they were all crying and screaming. I never had to spend a penny after that. It was my first trip there, and it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. So the equipment does change It does change things. Again, I can't answer your question about how it's received. It has only been recently restored, all of this stuff. It's been in the basement. I thank my sister-in-law who kept it for 10 years in her basement in a mildewy old place and kept it dry. And I thank Bob Pesci for having helped me store it in Providence, in East Providence over the years. This stuff would not exist if it wasn't for certain people who have worked very, very hard to restore it. For Claire, who's been very, very instrumental in it, and Paul Beck, I believe that's Paul's last name, forgive me if I'm wrong, who has been, for the last 10 years, restoring this stuff. And it takes, if you were here yesterday afternoon and watched the film of him restoring these things, it's quite a process. It's quite a process. Each tape takes a long, long, long time to restore. So we're just at the point of bringing these tapes out again for the first time since the 70s. Most of the footage that I have was seen once and put in a box and put in storage. So it has become an incredible record of that period in Africa and here in the United States, and we're hoping to save it as an archive. I can't hear you. Yes, we're actually, we tried to get a bunch of high school people here, and someone came yesterday. We had a whole afternoon for high school youngsters, and there were quite a few yesterday. I was very pleased to talk to them and have them see the work. And yes, we will be working on trying to do that exactly. Yes.
What current project are you working on right now?
I've been painting. Thank you. I stopped doing video a long time ago. I realized I couldn't make any money. I was starving. So I stopped doing video. The last video I made was in 1988, and it's going to be shown tomorrow at the library here. What's that? Friday, excuse me, at Friday. It's called Mao Meets Muddy. And I went to Beijing with an artist named Frederick Brown, absolutely fantastic artist, and we were in Beijing for 3 months, the year before Tiananmen Square. And he was the very first, really the first artist to show at the People's Revolutionary Museum on Tiananmen Square. They cleared all Mao Zedong stuff out so that he could have a show. Fred's an African-American artist, a very great artist. He passed away last year. Hello, Fred. And so when I got back, they had shows on the morning, what is it, Sun morning show on Sunday. They had Fred on there and all that, and it used some of my footage and so on. But I made my own footage, and it's called Mao Meets Muddy. And it has to do with what this China and America and this group of people coming in to China at that time. It was just as the transition was taking place. So it's going to be shown tomorrow. And that was the last tape I made. I tried to get people to show it, and it didn't happen. And I said, you know what? You've been spending a lot of money, a lot of time, and tired of being poor. So I stopped doing video.
So you're doing these large-scale paintings now?
Yes.
Pointillism?
Well, it's more than pointillism. Actually, the first paintings were based upon tantric philosophy, and my mother's crocheting. My mother would sit there, and she would be watching TV and turn out these magnificent mathematical structures, and I would say, "Mom, you should hang that on the wall." And she'd say, "It's just a bedspread." You know, so, okay. And it was the patience that really attracted me to that. It takes a lot of patience to do that, and I've taught myself. I'm not a patient person. A lot of people who know me will say I'm not a patient person, but I've taught myself to be patient with that. The jail experience taught me patience too. Any other questions? Yes. Where did they first? At Museum of Modern Art in New York one time, Electronic Arts Intermix in New York. You'd have to look in the catalog. They've been shown at the Pompidou Center in Paris recently, actually. The Pompidou Center has purchased a number of the tapes. If you were here for the nose blow up in the plastic bag, that's now in the collection of the Pompidou Center in Paris. So they've been shown in museums all over, actually, since the very beginning. The Sao Paulo Biennale in Brazil in 1971, in Italy, in France, all over.
Any other questions?
Yes. Yes. I think we've lost the moment. I think we've lost the moment. You would have loved to see the pictures of the Ernestina and the is it the Ernestina and what was the other one?
Madeline.
Hmm?
The Madeline.
Yes, coming up the river here and the guys on the boats and all of that. It was where the India Point Park is right there is it was one of the places where our ancestors came and actually landed in Providence. They landed in Providence and New Bedford. My father was quite proud that he came with his visa and didn't come in the hole like those Italians and Irish. and you could land right here. I'm sure there are some people in the audience who remember the last ship was, I think, was 1965 that came and landed here. And it was always a major event for us Cape Verdeans to go down to where India Point Park is right now and welcome these ships, because some of them never made it. And then everybody would come and they would pack some barrels with a bunch of clothes and stuff to send back to Cape Verde. There was international trade going on here, it's international shipping with the Cape Verdean community up until 1965. And now you can fly direct from T.F. Green Airport. They just started it this year. So you can fly direct. I think I'm going to do it with my brother in February. And I'm going to think of my ancestors. Okay, it took my father 28 days to sail here on a two-masted schooner with a whole bunch of other people. They didn't know if they were going to make it. And they landed in New Bedford. And it's very interesting to me that my brother and I are going to be able to get on a plane at T.F. Green Airport and land in Cape Verde and stay in a 5-star hotel. You know? Maybe. Maybe. I'm counting on you. Yes? Yeah. Footage, yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Would you like a microphone?
You stopped doing your video, and then I guess you started to paint.
Well, I went to undergraduate school for painting.
Okay.
And then after I got out of prison, I went to graduate school at California Institute of the Arts, where I was Alan Capro's teaching assistant. And that's where we got into the video seriously. Before that time, you know, when Anne, that's Anne over there, Anne and I came back from Canada together, and we took sanctuary in a church in Church of the Mediator on Elmwood Avenue. And we understood that to manipulate the media was one of the things that you had to do, because there wasn't, this was before Porta Packs, and so we manipulated the media, and Anne could probably tell some good stories about that time when the police came, and we programmed it so that WPRO, Channel 5, and Channel 10 would be there at that time, so that would generate we control the media by controlling the media itself, rather than having our own machines to do it. And it's sort of like Abby Hoffman throwing money in Wall Street, throwing the money out, and it becoming a big happening event. And so I learned quite a bit from Alan Capro with these videos, especially if you saw the ones this afternoon with the balloon nose blow up, and those were all done at Cal Arts, and they were all a direct result of studying with Alan.
Are there any other questions, comments? Then?
Ask my brother what 5-star hotel we're going to stay at.
No, I'm not going to get between you and Izzy and who's paying for the hotel. So, you know, I know how to back out of that one. Without Tony, I think we can bring the program to a close, and I'd like everyone to please give a round of applause to Tony.